Joshua 4 through 6. The Israelites were instructed to gather 12 stones and leave them in the Jordan riverbed. This speaks of the death of Christ and the believer's identification with Christ's death. His death was our death. Buried with Christ in baptism, which means identification with. They were also to gather 12 stones and pile them at Gilgal, the first town they came to after crossing the Jordan. These were to be a memorial so the Israelites could tell their children when asked about the stones of the great power of God in bringing them across the Jordan into the promised land. This speaks of the life of the resurrected Christ and that he gives to those who identify with him in his death. The text says that when the Israelites finished crossing, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and went over all its banks as before. If God's called you to it, he has the power to bring you through it. In Joshua 5, the kings in the promised land heard of God's mighty power in bringing the Israelites across the Jordan, and their hearts melted. God instructed Joshua to circumcise the males. These were those who had wandered in the desert and had not been circumcised, as apparently that rite was neglected during that time because of the reproach of unbelief. Remember also that this was the sign of the Abrahamic covenant, which promised the very land they were now standing on. The old nature can't inherit spiritual blessings. The old sinful nature isn't even interested in spiritual blessings. We must be born again and given a new nature to desire and enjoy the blessings of God. The Israelites celebrated Passover in Gilgal, and the day after ate some of the produce of the land. The manna ceased the day after they ate. This was a direct reminder and fulfillment of God's promises he had made to the people. One can almost hear them saying, "We're going to go ahead and enjoy the promises of God now." Maybe we ought to try that. Note that as they are faithful to partake of the Passover lamb, a symbol of Christ, God supplies their needs. He does the same for us. Joshua encountered one with a drawn sword and questioned him. He identified himself as the captain of the host of the Lord and told Joshua to remove his sandals because he was standing on holy ground. Many believe this was the pre-incarnate Christ. Joshua fell on his face and bowed down to him. This encounter reminded Joshua who was in charge, and it also surely encouraged him for what was ahead. In Joshua 6, God told Joshua he was giving Jericho into his hand. He told him to circle the city once for 6 days with armed men, 7 priests blowing 7 trumpets, then the ark, and lastly a rear guard. On the 7th day, the Israelites were to circle the city 7 times and then shout. Israel obeyed, and the walls of Jericho fell down flat. Every living thing that was destroyed, but Rahab and her family were spared. Joshua warned the Israelites not to keep anything for themselves, but that items were to be brought into the treasury of the Lord. Wow, it's a good thing Joshua knew who was in charge, and God had encouraged him because this was a very unique strategy. When we are submitted to the captain of the host, we can trust him no matter how strange it gets. We're going to start the book of Luke today. This is written by Luke, who many think was a Gentile. He was a doctor. With regard to why he wrote this, he said to Theophilus, whom he wrote this to, and to you and me, that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. The initial account concerns Zacharias, a priest married to Elizabeth, who was barren. Zacharias was chosen to enter the temple to burn incense, and the angel Gabriel appeared to him and said his prayers would be answered, and Elizabeth would have a son, whom they would name John. John was to observe the Nazirite vow and drink no wine or liquor. He would be filled with the Holy Spirit even in Elizabeth's womb. He would come as a forerunner of Messiah in the spirit and power of Elijah. Zacharias doubted Gabriel's word and was struck with the inability to speak until the birth of John. God had perfect timing and purpose as he answered Zacharias and Elizabeth's prayers. God has perfect timing and purpose as he answers our prayers as well.